Well, this year in the garden, I planted 4 different types of cucumbers and got 4 different types of results. So I'm going to show you the cucumbers I've planted and the results that I got. Also, while I'm out here, I'm going to cover some of the questions that I've been asked about pests, diseases, when to water, when to fertilize, when to pick. Here, we're going to answer a whole bunch of those questions. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the garden. Let's start off with this first one right here. This is my Biet alpha. This is a parthenotropic seedless cucumber, which means that it'll actually produce a cucumber that has no seeds, but also it doesn't need a pollinator in order for it to produce fruit. Now this guy was producing really well at the very beginning. He came up out of the ground, got to about 6-8 inches tall and started producing fruit. That's when I made my first mistake. The small little fruit that it produced, I let it grow, and then what happened was it spent all of its energy trying to grow that one particular cucumber, and it didn't spend any energy of growing tall. What I should have done is probably taken it off a little bit earlier, and then that way the plant would have had its energy going up instead of trying to grow the cucumber. But if you look at some of these here, there's one right down here. It's actually on the ground. This will bring me to the first question I get asked. Why do my cucumbers turn yellow? If you look at these two, one of them, this one right here, has a yellow tinge to it while this one doesn't. Well, there's a lot of reasons why a cucumber will turn yellow. A lot of times it's watering. If it doesn't get enough water, then it's going to start to turn yellow on you. That's not the case here. This one was just the fact that I left it on the vine too long. So a lot of your yellowing in cucumbers, you want them to grow really big. Well, sometimes they just stop growing. And when they do that, then it's just time to go ahead and pull them off when they get that dark green look to it. But this cucumber is actually doing pretty well. The way that I judge how a plant produces is how it throws off its male and its female flowers, and I'll get into that of the perfect plant here in just a minute. But this one, about every 4 flowers is a male, and then it'll go and throw a female flower and produce a cucumber. Second one that we run into, second question, why are my cucumbers curling? That does come down to watering, and there'll be another discussion over here of what happens. I've got one right here, you can see it, it's starting to curl. I really can't straighten that up, but the reason why it started curling was we had a deluge of water, and it absorbed a bunch of water, then the soil dried up, and then it started that curling process. So this guy, even though he's going to be a sweet tasting cucumber, he's just not going to be straight and perfect like you see at a grocery store. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Well, this plant right here is from Hoss Tools, and it is called the Hossinator Cucumber. It has been producing really well. This is an F1 hybrid, which means it's pretty resistant to diseases and pests. So, and it's been producing some pretty good fruit. I've got one right here, right at the very front. As a matter of fact, look at the size of this guy. This is about an 8-inch cucumber, and these have been coming off the vine for the last 2 to 3 weeks. This plant has been producing probably 2 to 3 cucumbers a week. It's almost hard for us to keep up with it. I don't think there's any more back here. All right, so this brings me to another question. What kind of viruses can a cucumber get? Well, here's one that is actually deadly to plants, and you need to get ahead of it before it actually takes over the whole plant, and that's called a Mosaic virus. Now, you can see it. This one's actually starting to get it. Now, when you look at this plant leaf, you're going to see it's a dark green leaf, but then you're going to see little, well, it's a mosaic look that starts turning yellow. That is the sign of a mosaic virus. Now, there is no fungicide, there is no treatment for it. All you can do is just kind of remove either the entire plant if the whole plant is infected, or if you see the leaves early on, which is what you need to pay attention to, then make sure that you go in and snip the leaves off. We're going to go through and cut a couple of these out that I see. Oh, and look at that. As I'm cutting it back, here's another one. Here's another question. Why are my cucumbers getting all round and they're only pointy at one end? That also goes back to watering. If you get a deluge of rain, it is going to cause this to happen. It is going to start swelling up really rapidly, and then you're going to get this bulbous look. Now, these came off the same plant, and they were growing. This one was about a week earlier than this one started. This is when the rain started, when it was young, and this is what ended up happening to it. So it's still going to taste the same. It's just going to have the little bulb to it. Well, let's go back, and I want to go ahead and snip off some more of these. When When I collect all of these, if it has a virus on there, if it has a mold or a fungus, I have a bucket, which I've got to go get, that I don't have out here with me. I'll put these in a bucket. Now I've got a burn pile. These things will not go into a compost. Don't ever put anything that's got a fungus or a mold or any type of disease on it into your compost pile, because this stuff can last up to a year in your garden. So I'll put it into a bucket that I'll carry out to my burn pile, and I'll burn this stuff. If you don't have a burn pile, go ahead and throw it into a garbage bag, cinch it up, and just throw it away. Don't let it stay anywhere near your plants. Oh, here's another problem right here. When you start to see little spots on your plant, and you're going to see like little white dots, and then it has a brown ring to it, that's a sign that you're getting some type of pest. Usually it's going to be aphids. Now if you look at the bottom here, you can see, and I'll see if I can show you a close-up picture of it, you can see where they'll come into the bottom and they'll suck the sap and the juice out of the leaf, and it causes that disease. It causes that problem. It's really not that hard on the plant if it still has this on it, but it is an indication that you're starting to get some aphids and some pests into your plant, and you need to treat them. The way that you treat a plant with aphids is going to be neem oil. If you get a cold pressed neem oil, it takes 2 ounces for every gallon of water. Spray the entire plant, and spray it underneath the leaves, and also spray it across the top. Saturate the plant. Do it either late in the evening or super early in the morning before the pollinators come out, so it'll absorb into the plant. The neem will then be ingested into the aphid when it starts to eat and suck the sap out, and it'll kill it that way. All right, before we go over to my last cucumber plant that I absolutely screwed up, it's all my fault and I'm going to try to fix it. I'm going to show you my favorite cucumber so far this season, and that's this guy right here, and this is called the Deli Star. Now the reason why I like the Deli Star is the fact that you can eat this fruit that it produces at any time in its growing stage. So if you want to have a small little pickling cucumber like a gherkin, you can pick it and it's not going to be bitter. It's going to taste absolutely fantastic. Or you can let it grow like this one that I just picked to about this size. I do love the colors to them. They have that dark green that you're used to seeing in a cucumber with the little white stripes that go down the side of it. The flavor of these things has been absolutely fantastic. The skin is very thin, so it doesn't have that waxy taste when you eat it if you just leave the skin on it. Now that brings me to another question that I've gotten. Why do my cucumbers taste bitter? Well, cucumbers have a chemical in it called cucurbacin. Now, cucurbacin is a natural defense mechanism for the plant. What it is very bitter tasting. So when a plant goes under stress and the cucumbers aren't ready to be eaten yet, it will have that cucurbacin inside of the cucumber, so it makes it taste a little bit bitter. Now, a burpless variety type cucumber like these are, actually even the Biet alphas, and then over there on my straight 8s, they are a burpless cucumbers. They don't have a lot of that cucurbacin in it. So you can eat these at any time. But if you have a cucumber that tastes a little bitter, that means that one, it's not a burpless variety, and number two, the plant is kind of under stress. Usually it's from lack of water or lack of nutrition. So you need to check that your phosphorus and your nitrogen levels are okay, and then let that cucumber continue to grow, and it'll kind of dilute itself out, and that bitter taste is going to go away. Here's another reason why I love this plant. This plant, the way that it produces its cucumbers, when you look at the main vine going up, and it is consistent throughout this plant, you will see a male flower, and then it's going to throw a female flower with a cucumber. Then it's going to go up to the next, and it's going to throw a male flower. Then it's going to produce a female flower with a cucumber on it. Another male flower, another cucumber. So it has been producing, every other split on the branches has been producing a cucumber. All right, before we go into my major screw up, which is this guy right here, I want to talk to you about some of the other questions that we've gotten. One of them is, why is my plant yellowing? It looks like it has a yellow malaise to it. Well, that could be a couple reasons. One of them could be a nutrient deficiency. Once these guys start coming out of the ground, you usually have fertilizer already in the soil, and that's fantastic. But after about 3 or 4 weeks, when you start getting flowers and they start producing cucumbers, they get incredibly smoking hungry. So what you want to do is make sure that you start adding a supplemental fertilizer to the ground. Now, I use Agrothrive. If you haven't seen any of my other videos, I absolutely love it, but it needs to have something that has kind of a general NPK to it, a little more phosphorus and potassium if you can get it. Maybe a 4-6-5 is actually good for this type of plant. Secondly, when you start seeing a yellowing leaf, but the veins are very dark, but the leaf itself is yellow, I'll see if I can show you an example of that. That is generally a sign of an iron deficiency. Don't run out to the store and buy an iron supplement for it. Typically, you have enough iron in your soil to be able to grow your cucumber plant successfully. Typically, what that is going to be a high pH in your soil. As your pH starts to rise, it becomes harder and harder for your cucumber plants to pick up all of its nutrients, and it starts creating that yellow plant with dark green veins in it. Best thing to do is go ahead and check the soil pH and then lower it. If you want to lower it rapidly, then put in 2 tablespoons of vinegar with 1 gallon of water. Water the plant that way. It'll bring the pH down. Your plant's going to recover just fine. Now, another reason why your plant could be showing that yellow malaise and slowing down its production could be because of magnesium. A deficiency in magnesium can slow the plant down in its growth, because magnesium is very critical to help bringing in the nitrogen, the potassium, and the phosphorus up into the plant. Now, magnesium is very soluble, so as we start to water and we start to rain, especially in porous soils, you're going to get that leakage of the magnesium out. Now, you can repair that very quickly just by a solution of Epsom salt, which you probably have in your bathroom. It's 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt into a gallon of water. Now, you can apply that directly to the plant, so that way it'll go straight to the roots. The magnesium will then help pick up those nutrients and get it back up into the plant. And you can also use that same solution with that same dilution as a foliar spray to spray it on the leaves, and you're going to get a rapid recovery there. And you're going to start to see your leaves recovering really quickly. All right, see this bad boy right here, 6.5 feet tall, super green, lush as could be. I mean, an absolute beast of a plant. This is the Super 8, and it is also a burpless cucumber. It is fantastic normally and very prolific as far as a production. But when you neglect it and you don't prune it right, all you get is this. I got a bunch of leaves and I have a ton of male flowers, which brings me to another one of the questions that I get asked. Why are my plants only producing male flowers? One of 2 reasons. One, above the temps of 89, 90 degrees, it has a tendency just to throw male flowers instead of female flowers to produce cucumbers. That could be one issue. The other issue could be, well, you just neglected pruning your plants and you've got this beast of a bush that looks really good, and all it's concerned with is just growing green leaves instead of growing cucumbers. So what I'm going to do is go through and just kind of trim this guy out and talk you through how I'm going to do it and try to get this guy to start producing, because I only have about another maybe 3 to 4 weeks of production before this is going to be too hot for these guys to be really productive, and then I'll be done. So this was my screw up. I just wasn't paying attention. I got busy with planting my summer crops already, and then this guy took off and I ended up with this. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start at the base of the plant and work my way up and try to find out where the main vines are and where the runners are. Now, this happens to be a runner, but it gives me a chance to tell you kind of how a cucumber plant should grow. If this was the main vine coming out of the ground, typically you're going to see a leaf, and then you're going to see a flower, and then with that is going to be a tendril. That's going to be how it's going to grow up, and then you're going to have the main vine's going to go, then you're going to see another tendril, another leaf, and either a male or a female flower, and it will continue to produce that way. If it starts to do an offshoot like that, if it starts to come off, then you want to have that sucker plant. You want to cut that off. Now this, because of neglect, is probably a sucker plant. I don't know, but I'm going to take this guy off because he's definitely not producing any cucumbers and he's just laying here on the ground. So I'm going to go through and cut everything off of the bottom. Now, also guys, while I'm doing this, let's talk about the pests that are in a cucumber, that hit a cucumber plants. Do you remember when I talked about cucurbacin making the cucumber bitter? Well, also cucurbacin is an attractant for the cucumber beetle. One of the things you can do to kind of limit a cucumber beetle pressure, which those things are horrific when they get into your garden, is to, at the beginning of the season, plant the burpless variety. It has less cucurbacin in it. And then also a word of warning, there are cucumber beetle traps that are there that uses a pheromone or cucurbacin to actually attract the beetles to it. Don't ever use those. That kind of a trap is actually designed to attract the cucumber beetle. Now, it works well if you're at scale and you want to figure out how many cucumber beetles are within an acre or so, that's fine. But when you put those scented cucumber beetle traps out, all it's doing is telling any cucurbacin, any cucumber beetle that's in the area, hey, here's food, and they come over, they don't find the trap, they find your plant, and then they start eating your plant up. So don't do that. If you do have cucumber beetles, they are attracted, there's a runner there, they are attracted to the color yellow. Now there is something called tanglefoot or trap 'em, and you can get a yellow solo cup, and it's super sticky aerosol spray. Put a bamboo skewer through it, and I'll show you a picture of that. Spray it up so it's super sticky, and then just stick it in the ground next to your cucumber plant, and it will actually attract the cucumber beetle. They're attracted to the yellow flowers of the cucumber plant, but they'll even be more attracted to that solo cup, that yellow solo cup. Okay, second thing, grief, there's so much of this down here. The other thing that you're going to have attacking your plant is going to be the cucumber moth or the cucumber worm. The pickle worm is what they call it. That thing is absolutely horrific when it gets into your garden. The best way that you can treat for the cucumber moth, one of two ways, is you can cover your plant up, but in order to do that, you're going to have to cover your plant up in the evening when the cucumber moth is out and it comes in and lays its eggs. The larva comes out and then gets into your cucumbers. Or you're going to use BT. Now BT is a natural organic insecticide that you can spray on your plant. Do it about every other week, and it'll actually help with the cucumber beetle with the cucumber moth. Next are aphids. Aphids are going to attract to your plant. Now the aphids, they are controlled by Neem. I think we've already talked about that. So make sure that you get your Neem on your cucumber plant. Put that on about every other week, and you should be fine. So let's continue to go ahead and start cutting this thing up, and I'll get back to you here in just a second. Another thing with cucumber beetles that I forgot to mention, they do lay their eggs in the soil at the base of the plant. Now what you can do is use a BT drench around the base of your cucumber plant, and that can help kill them as they come up out of the ground in the larva stage. Another thing you can do, if it's just an individual plant or two and you're not doing it at scale with a whole bunch of plants, you can actually take aluminum foil and then put it at the base of the plant and just kind of anchor it down with some dirt. For some reason, the beetle itself does not like to be in that highly reflective environment, and it'll stay away from the cucumber plants. All right, so I got most, or what I think are the runners, out of here, but now I'm going through and I'm starting at the bottom and I'm taking off all of these leaves that are down here in the bottom and getting them out of the way so I can clearly see which one's a runner and which one's actually the plant, because it is that bushy down here. This one I thought was a runner, and it's actually a main plant. That's a long leaf. You should never let it go that long. And as they get older, you continue to trim these leaves off. But I'm going to work and get all of these leaves off the bottom of the unproductive part of this plant. That way I can push up the growth and all the nutrients going up to where it should be producing its cucumbers. Hey, look at that. Just as I'm pruning out all of this bushy growth underneath, there's a straight A cucumber. Another reason why you want to keep it trimmed pretty well is so you can see when the fruit's starting to produce. Oh, wait a minute. Hey, look over here. And here is another one. Goodness gracious. All right, as we start to get the bottom cleared out here, we've removed the leaves and the tendrils, and we're just kind of pruning our way up. The next thing I'm going to do, one coming off the main vine, is I'm going to start taking away all of the male flowers. Now I can take away all of these down here on the lower part because there is a ton headed up that way, and I want to make sure that I'm sending all the energy up to where the cucumbers are going to be. And also, if you see in between here, I don't know if it's going to show up very well, there's a male flower, and then also you see these little fuzzy pieces. These are just going to be those little sucker vines that come off of it. So as the plant, even towards the top, as it starts to mature, you're going to get these little fuzzy pieces. Well, you don't really even have to snip those off. You can just grab them with your finger and pull those things right off. And then that way it's also going to take some more energy away from the bottom of the plant and move it towards the top. So I'm going to go ahead and thin all of this stuff off with all of these flowers and all of these little suckers, and I'll just continue to move on. Well, I thinned it out, I think, about as much as the plant can handle without putting it under a whole bunch of stress. I'll come back in another week or so and I'll thin it out a little bit more, keeping all the energy up towards the top so that it can produce cucumbers and just not leaves and male flowers. Now, if you get benefit out of this video, please do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. Also, if you have any type of comments or questions that you want to have answered, leave those in the description below also. Leave it and give me a comment. I'll try to get back and answer your questions for you. But until then, I'm Greg from Bell's Backyard. I'll see you in the backyard soon.